We're very, very fortunate to have one of the industry thought leaders, great research, Mr. Gary Barnett, who is the chief architect, the chief analyst at Ovum. Well-respected, great speaker. His industry research is, you've got to download the industry research. So he's going to be talking about the industry trends, some of the best practices from his perspective. So please welcome me, Mr. Gary Barnett.
Thank you very much. Right, now there's a little bit of competition between the other stages in terms of people. You're very, very welcome. What I need you to do is make lots and lots of noise during the presentation, as if someone has won big in craps. So I want to hear the occasional woo and yeehaw and stuff like that, so that we can encourage more people to come. The more fun we appear to be having, the more neighbors you will have to share the joy with. So if I stop and say 21, okay, that's the code for us all to go whoop, and then we can move on. Important information there. So, hello, I'm Gary Barnett. My career actually began on the Burroughs mainframe. You're probably thinking he looks far too young. Well, thank you very much. I've looked after myself. So it was worse than that. It was on the Burroughs mainframe, and it was in French. I was working for Unisys in Paris. And I was partly involved, although dear God, I hope that none of my code is still in production, with the bringing of TCP/IP to the Burroughs mainframe. In the course of the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about some of the mega trends that are driving our businesses and the implications that they have on the mainframe and the future of the mainframe. I want to talk about some of the challenges that my clients bring to me in the context of the mainframe and how we work with them to resolve them. And then I'm going to close with a call to action. Whenever you go to Analyst school, you're taught that every presentation should end with 3 things that you encourage your listeners to do. So there's some homework at the end. But very quickly, this is me. My passions are sailing. That's me at the Paralympics in 2012. The highlight of my sailing career. You'll note, as an organizer, not as a competitor, I'm actually rubbish at sailing. I just love doing it. That is a prototype of an air quality monitoring platform. In my spare time, I'm the Chief Technology Officer of a project that's hoping to build the world's largest air quality monitoring network. So I have wielded a soldering iron in the goal of building IoT. And again, you'll be very relieved to know that that is the prototype. We got a grown-up to actually finish it for the production version. Anyone recognize these 2 mainframes? That is a Burroughs mainframe, and that is an IBM mainframe, and I have worked on both. So that's me. I'm a Scorpio as well. I don't actually believe in star signs, but rather irritatingly, all my star sign believing friends tell me that's a typically Scorpio trait, which is very frustrating. So, megatrends. I'm not going to bother you with a massive exposition of the importance of cloud or the bigness of data or how everything has got to be social and how we've all got to be mobile, because I'm sure you've all seen dozens and dozens of presentations on these topics before. So you can rest assured you're not going to have to endure another set of 50 slides explaining the future importance of the cloud. I'm going to add one thing, though, the Internet of Things in there, and you'll see those 3 processors there sitting underneath an English 20p piece. Those processors are 1.5 millimeters by 2.5 millimeters in size, and I soldered those suckers onto those boards myself. What you don't see is the 20 ones I screwed up and had to throw away, but these. And the point about this is the Internet of Things is not just about us deploying massively powerful computers all over the place, you know, NVIDIA Jetsons with 2 gigabytes of RAM and running at 2.2 gigahertz. The vast majority of the Internet of Things is going to be tiny little devices like these, which send us regular pieces of data about 1 or 2 phenomena. It might be the level of light, it might be the amount of noise, the amount of shock a parcel is enduring. And all of these tiny little bits of data are going to be flowing into our systems, and we need to figure out what to do with them, because in fact, when it comes to the Internet of Things, there's absolutely no point at all in it unless we are provoked to do something by the data that comes from the Internet of Things. If we just sort of sit and admire it, it's a pretty pointless thing. We need to be able to act upon that data and do something about it. And whilst in and of themselves, all of these things are things that you've been briefed on and briefed on and briefed on, what I think is interesting is the combination of these things. The bringing together of these different megatrends are going to change in a very profound way the way we build process that our business wants us to, the way we adapt our businesses in the face of changing customer needs. We're way beyond the old era of customer relationship management. That assumes we can manage the customer relationship. We're in the era of customer-managed relationships, where customers take over. In the good old days, our customer went from being a prospect to a lead to an opportunity, and bang, we shot them and we ate them for dinner. Now, customers have taken over that process. So a lot of the traditional ways we think about process are being dissolved by this nexus of different things. We survey quite literally tens of thousands of people every year to ask what their priorities are and what's on their mind, what's concerning them. And surprise, surprise, the same things pretty much come up all of the time. There are a couple of data points I'm not showing here. One, my personal favorite, is when we ask line of business people why projects go wrong, they always say, well, IT didn't understand what we wanted. And when we ask IT people why projects go wrong, they always say the business didn't understand what it wanted. So there is this divide between our understanding of what the business wants and the business's ability to explain to us. And that's why we're starting to embrace things like Agile. 21. Yeah. Woo! Yeah! Woo! Thank you. That's why we're starting to embrace things like Agile in an attempt to better respond to and address the requirements of the business. And this isn't just actually a challenge that we face in the world of the mainframe. This is a challenge we face in distributed computing as well. Most of my millennial clients don't talk about legacy COBOL, they talk about legacy Java. And trust me, legacy Java is a shed-load harder to debug and change than good old reliable COBOL, which I'm sure we all love and admire in many ways. Organizations desperately want to change. And to a certain extent, I can sum this up in three things. The three key priorities for a CIO today are, can I deliver more change? Can I better manage risk? And of course, can I better manage cost? Cost, risk, and change are the three magic words that we need to be thinking about every time we make a proposal to our higher-ups. Because if we can propose something to them that's positive on cost, that's positive on change, and positive on risk, the likelihood of us being thrown out of the office is pretty slim. So think cost, risk, and change. And ask yourself which platform exists within your organization that can offer the greatest cost, risk, and change benefits. And I believe very passionately that for many workloads, that platform really is the mainframe. So enterprise risk, security, compliance, driving insight. We've got all of this data, but in many cases, we don't know what we know. Can you remember the Rumsfeld quote when he talked about unknown unknowns, unknown unknowns, and known knowns? He forgot the fourth one, which is the unknown knowns. Yeah? How many of you work for organizations that don't really know quite what they know? How many of you work for organizations where the biggest and most important decisions are not made off the back of data that's freshly come out of your core systems of record, but it's come out of some feral Excel spreadsheet that's been mooching around the organization, going from email inbox to email inbox? We have a challenge to help our business leaders be better informed, more reliably informed, and more accurately informed. And that's a challenge that we need to take on and bring to our bosses. So, by and large, the most frequent inquiry I get from my clients around the mainframe is, how do we explain the value of the mainframe to the rest of the organization? Very few of my clients come to me and go, oh, I bloody hate the mainframe. Very few of them. But they are struggling to explain the value of the mainframe across the broader organization. So most of my work with clients is about helping them get down to the business of reimagining the mainframe for themselves, but also evangelizing the mainframe within the organization. There's some good news here, and it's great that immediately following me, you'll be hearing from someone from IBM about the future direction of the mainframe, because IBM and CA, which is the biggest ISV in the mainframe environment, are investing billions of dollars in this platform. And today's mainframe brings you the fastest production server processor in the world. There is no other production processor running faster than the mainframe processors. The commitments that most of my clients have to the mainframe, and there are dozens of studies conducted every year. CA does its studies, BMC does its studies, IBM does its studies, we do, and by and large, the number of people who are predicting that they're going to move off the mainframe has remained pretty stable for the last decade. It's a tiny amount by comparison to the number of people who are continuing to invest. And at least half of the people we talk to are intending to grow the workload on their mainframe rather than simply stabilize it or see it decline. The really key thing about the mainframe is how we handle the two different types of workload: traditional workloads, the IMS, the CICS COBOL, and I don't like legacy, I prefer cherished. There's those cherished applications upon which most of our businesses absolutely depend. And then there are these new workloads. And back in 1999, when some of the German guys in one of IBM's labs got SUSE Linux running on the mainframe just because they thought it would be a cool idea for Christmas. The idea of running Linux on the mainframe is no longer a controversial idea. There were some issues around Java. They got Java running on the mainframe again in the late 90s. And there were some fundamental problems with the processor architecture, which meant that there were other platforms that were just going to be better at Java, fundamentally around floating point maths and multi-threading. And what's happened to the latest processor on the mainframe platform is that they've really addressed both of those issues. So in fact, Java runs really, really well. I think it was a 30% improvement in Java performance on the mainframe with the most recent processor. So the signs are positive. But we do have a perception problem. And in many cases, people's perception of the mainframe are kind of stuck in a couple of decades ago. And it's incumbent on all of us, and it's incumbent on people like me to help people understand what has changed within the mainframe platform and what implications that has for the underlying value proposition. Is it too costly? Is it too inflexible? Is it a dead platform? Well, it's certainly not a dead platform when 96 out of the top 100 banks in the world absolutely depend on it. And trust me, Computer Associates does not want those clients to go away. IBM doesn't want those clients to go away. This ecosystem brings in an awful lot of revenue for these companies, and of course they are, because they're not idiots, investing in supporting that revenue and moving it forward. So this is not a troubled platform. Not like Itanium, for example. Anyone got any Itanium? No. You see. More evolved audience than some I have to deal with. Is it inflexible? Well, actually, there aren't many platforms that can run as many different types of workload as the mainframe. Obviously, you can't run Windows, but who in their right mind wants to run Windows on a server? So, we can set that aside. But you can run Java, you can run Linux natively, you can run Java either on Linux or natively inside ZOS. You can run the full array of middleware and database technologies on the mainframe. The mainframe is often used as a database consolidation platform, and I've seen some clients get cost savings from the big red-colored database, consolidating that onto the mainframe of up to 75, sometimes even higher in terms of license fee, 75% in terms of license fee savings. So costly and inflexible are two ones that I think we can challenge. And I think the fact that you can't fly on a plane, you can't use an ATM, you can't hire a car, you can't buy groceries without a mainframe somewhere being involved in the transaction would suggest very strongly that it's very far from being a dead platform. But we need to have an effective response to those challenges. One is we need to really understand not just how much our platform costs, but how terribly expensive it is to run massively distributed systems. how we shouldn't just be counting the cores or thinking about VMware, but we should be thinking about all of the Cisco we have to buy in order to run distributed systems, all of the duplication we have to put into networks and infrastructure in order to run resilient distributed systems. And when you start doing the mathematics, in fact, the mainframe value proposition just on economic terms, let's set aside the resilience that we all know about, the reliability that we all know about, just the simple mathematics becomes much, much more even. In some cases, it's definitely a cheaper platform. Not in every case, by any means, but in some cases. It's been helped by the fact that you can now get capacity-based pricing. So you can essentially pay as if you were paying for cloud resources. And believe it or not, in a shocking industry round turn, IBM will reduce that as well as increase it, which is, something that's a real innovation in terms of capacity-based pricing. And if you've been familiar with it in the past, but let's look briefly at some of the history. This is obviously way before my time. Back in the bad old days, IBM was in denial about the existence of the interweb connected network. In fact, there really wasn't an interweb connected network in the 1980s. There was a little bit of local area networking, but the mainframe was properly a fortress apart. And there was very little exchange of data between them. We had to do things like ETL onto tape and upload into mid-range systems. Then IBM begrudgingly admitted that there might be some reason why people might want to get access to the mainframe. Has anyone had an experience of APPC, Advanced Program-to-Program Communication? Put your hands up. Yeah. Did that feel like crawling on hands and knees over broken glass at all? Yeah, that's how it felt to me. But at least we were able to kind of clutch at bits of transactions, it's kind of, woo! And I was busy using Oracle 7, and we had to buy an IBM RS6000, because of course you couldn't do it directly, because that would have been crazy, wouldn't it? And this saw us up to the millennium and saw the rise of distributed computing, the emergence of distributed object middleware and middleware technologies that made it easier and easier and apparently cheaper and cheaper for us to create a quite logical mainframe out of all of these distributed computers. And I have a confession to make. That's about the time I became a client-server architect. I know, I'm sorry. I have seen the light. Again, I've come back to the true faith. And my job was fundamentally to lie to people about client-server. And what we did was we drew the lines between the machines as small as we possibly could, because we didn't want to talk about what it means to ship data over often very slow and bandwidth-constrained wide-area networks. And we didn't want to talk about the complexities of all the middleware we would have to buy to make these systems run. I just wanted to talk about DEC, because DEC was the coolest thing. PDP, and everyone went, woo, and 21. Thank you, guys. Yeah, it's coming, you're growing, brilliant. So then we came into the 2000s, and a couple of things had started to change. We had the emergence of service-oriented architectures, not just SOAP, which is one of the biggest disappointments of my entire career. I was very slightly involved in the creation of SOAP in 1999, and when it was launched, I described it as the Switzerland of middleware. This was middleware for mortals. You didn't have to be an object guru to make it work the same way you had to be to make Corba work. Has anyone successfully made Corba work? I have, for 7 minutes. I got an Iona orb to run for 7 minutes. I'm really proud of myself. And then, of course, we Corbaized SOAP and SOA and introduced all of the issues of interoperability and pain to SOAP. And developers around the world discovered RESTful web services or simple XML RPC. And we discovered a way of getting these different machines and different platforms to talk to one another. And IBM woke up. They woke up to the fact that it was probably a good idea to bring TCP/IP natively to the mainframe, and that it was probably a good idea to allow people to access mainframe transactions using some of these standardized protocols. So we had SOA enablement for kicks. So you didn't have to jump through a dozen burning hoops of fire or sing a 4-act Italian opera to coax data out of the mainframe. You could just grab the data using a simple web service request that all of your cool Java developers would be totally comfy with and comfy doing. And we saw the beginnings of Linux on the mainframe. We saw Linux developers starting to embrace it. And there were still one or two issues. We still had to recompile. The number of applications that were available for Linux on the mainframe was never quite as broad as the number of applications that are available for Linux on Intel. But again, in the last few years, that gap has narrowed enormously, partly through big, meaningful engineering changes to the platform and partly through ongoing support and investment in the idea of running multiple workloads. So today's mainframe is absolutely a hybrid part of distributed computing. So just as we can try with all sorts of middleware and networking technology to create a virtual mainframe by stringing together a bunch of blades, we can use the virtualization capabilities of the mainframe to create a virtual distributed computing system within a single mainframe environment, albeit without having to run hundreds of miles of fiber and deal with all of the issues about running that complex networking infrastructure, because we're not using fiber, we're using hypersockets. This is all stuff that's happening on the backplane. And in the context of that, when people talk to you about how awesome their distributed computing systems are, remind them about the speed of light. Yeah, there's nothing we can do about the speed of light unless you're deploying in Hogwarts. The speed of light is pretty constant. So if a piece of data has to travel 2 meters versus 20 centimeters, it is going to take 10 times longer to travel through the fiber. There's nothing we can do about it. And part of the value of the virtue of mainframes is the fact that we have our cores really, really co-located, very, very closely. So rather than doing what most applications spend 90% of their time doing, which is drumming their little application fingers on an imaginary desk, waiting for data to arrive, the faster we can ship the data to the application, the more quickly we can put it to work and do something about it. So this is the latest mainframe as launched. The Z13 has launched in January this year. First of all, it's bigger. Now, IBM likes to do that, and the big launch was all about how enormous the mainframe is. I often find myself counting the number of clients I have that need something quite that big, and wonder to myself, is there not a better story to tell around a not-so-big mainframe? The good news is the value proposition is still strong at surprisingly small scale. So, for example, if you were buying an enterprise Linux server or the Linux-only variant, the economics start getting really interesting at the point where you've got between 250 and 300 Linux images. That's when it becomes really very price comparable, just price comparable. Let's set aside the resilience, the availability, and the long-term scalability of the platform. So this thing you don't have to have massive, epic transaction requirements for the mainframe to be price competitive. Integrated analytics, improvements to the way data is stored, the way database processing takes place, that can be surfaced through a lot of your applications almost transparently, i.e. with next to no code changes. Integrated encryption, a huge concern, particularly as we are extending the reach of our legacy applications out to mobile devices, out to a greater number of potential endpoints. The ability to secure these things from end to end becomes increasingly important. Some very, very geeky enhancements to the core around support for Java and for Linux. And the hybrid cloud is rather scarily coming to the mainframe. We're still not at the point where you can drag and drop between Amazon and a System Z, but the fact that they have made a strong commitment to OpenStack signposts a future where I can imagine that sort of thing being a lot easier to do in the future than it is today. Yeah, you can go up to 8,000 Linux VMs, but as I said, at around 250 to 300, it starts actually being quite interesting in the terms of cost. But we have to have a challenge. We have to be able to address some of the criticisms and challenges that are placed at the door of the mainframe. We need to be more responsive and agile. A lot of us, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term, do you find yourselves doing agile fall development, where it kind of all starts very agile and then something appalling happens as we try and put it into production and it goes very, very waterfallish towards the end? We need to address that. And we need to engage with partners who can give us tools to help us do DevOps in the way that the new generation of developers expect us to. There are some components. I'm quite a big fan of multimodal. I think bimodal is a little bit, by definition, binary. I think we need to accept, though, that there are some applications and some pieces of infrastructure where, in fact, more mature methodologies might be more appropriate. But the key here is that we have to be able to incorporate the new ways of developing, new ways of putting things into production, and new ways of managing them once they're in production. And we need to find tools and partners who will help us do that, help us bring these modern techniques and approaches to the platform that I'm hoping we all love and respect so much. We have to be more open in terms of the culture we express within our organizations. It's probably much better now, but the struggles I used to have getting mainframe people to just let me have their data. We tend to be very, very guarded. We don't want muggles to have access to IMS data. We've now got the tools that enable us to give people access to that data in an audited, managed, and secure way. So our job should be not to be just the people who say no all the time, but to be the people who say, that's an awesome idea. Let's get that transaction data into people's mobile devices so they can have a better customer experience. And let's enable you, Mr. Java developer, Mr. PHP developer, Mr. Ruby developer, Node.js developer, to do that more quickly and with more assurance than ever before. And that's a challenge we've got to take on and evangelize within our organizations. We have to do some sales and marketing, and I know that sales and marketing isn't necessarily the thing that's going to make us leap out of bed with joy, but we have to be willing to sell this platform internally and sell its virtues in terms of agility, in terms of cost, in terms of resilience, reliability, and availability. And simplify, automate, and consolidate is not something we do once. You can't just do one simplification, automation, and consolidation program and assume it's going to be done. This is like the Golden Gate Bridge. Once we've finished one project, we have to start on the other side and continue again. This is a continuous process of learning and enhancement and tuning. And again, vendors like Computer Associates are not sitting on their hands. With every new release, their software, with every new release of their product strategy, they're coming up with tools and technologies that are worth looking at, because in fact, that upgrade might help you get that little bit of extra bang for your buck out of your legacy applications, or it might make it that little bit more easy to bring non-traditional workloads onto the platform. So keep talking to people like IBM and Computer Associates about what their plans are, because the stuff that's just around the corner might be really, really key to helping you energize the platform internally. So, the call to action. And fundamentally, this is about getting fit for the future. And I know that I'm not going to get fit just by moving to artificial sweetener as opposed to sugar. It's going to make a difference. I'm probably going to be less likely to have a heart attack, but that's not actually part of it. I need to take an holistic approach to my personal health and fitness. We have to be more agile in the face of business demands. We mustn't be seen as a bureaucracy. A bureaucracy is defined by being comprised of people who have more power to say no than they have to say yes. We want to move out of that, the mainframe guys say no reputation. And we have to continue to deliver those traditional core values that have been with the mainframe for 50 years. So this is a picture of Everest taken from base camp. I took this photograph from that guy's website. Obviously, I didn't go there. And this is what it feels like. How long do you think it takes to climb Everest? Well, if you're lucky enough to meet someone who's climbed Everest, they'll tell you 4.5 years. You think, bloody hell, that must have been freezing, 4.5 years. But it's 4.25 years of getting fit, of doing boring stuff like running, getting up and running every morning, eating muesli and stuff like that. They're only in Nepal for about 3 months, and they're only on the mountain for about 7 or 8 days. But climbing Everest requires us to do a lot of boring stuff. Now, my mother is from Dublin in Ireland. She's a classic Irish mother. The two most important things you need to know about an Irish mother are, if you ever commit a murder, an Irish mother will A, give you an alibi, and B, if they put her on a polygraph, flat. Not a problem. Irish mums are that loyal to their number one sons. The second thing is they make you eat your vegetables before you get your dessert. And this is something we have to confront. There's going to be some tedious, boring stuff that we have to do to bring our platform forward, to evangelize our platform. Lots of boring stuff around counting things. This is the classic getting up at 6 to run a few miles. Yes, we're going to have some awesome fun with technology that will enable us to rapidly automate the deployment of applications. Technology that's available from CA, you can talk to someone in this exhibition hall, that would enable us to analyze our DB2 queries, to find space in the batch window by optimizing and making those guys run more efficiently. And that's all great, but we also have to look after the boring stuff as well. And this is about being sensible about management, about constantly thinking, am I running too many regions? Can I consolidate? How can I make it easier to bring things into production? How can I make it easier to run multiple versions of a Kix transaction? All of these capabilities are available in the latest version of Kix and are all supported by the latest version, the management software that it's likely, since you're here at CA World, you'll be using. Of course, it takes technology, and we've got to have the right technology. And when you're looking for partners, yes, of course, you need to evaluate their technology. This is an ice axe. Would any of you have guessed that there were 7 things worth pointing out on an ice axe? That I would have thought that, it's an axe, it's for ice, was probably enough to know, but there are actually 7 things that are worth knowing about. I'm not going to go through them because I have no clue what they are, and I can assure you that if you gave me an ice axe and we were on the side of a glacier, you would be no safer. Yeah? On account of the fact that I would be more likely to stab myself or you in the eye with the ice axe than actually bury it. So the technology is great, and let's pick the best technology, but let's also use it properly. You can buy a silver bullet, but if you point the gun at your foot, you're not going to hit the vampire. You're going to hit yourself in the foot. It's not just technology, it's about how we apply it. And key to that is teamwork. And I would hope that this team, logically, within your organizations, would obviously comprise you, your mainframe colleagues, the people who are expert at running the platform, but I would also hope that it would include your organization's enterprise architects, the people who lead your distributed computing systems. And I would also hope that it would include the partners that you engage with, the technology partners. I would be hoping that one of those people would be from IBM, and I'd be hoping that one of those people would be from Computer Associates. And let me be honest with you, I nag IBM and Computer Associates all the time about the work that I feel that they need to do to help you do your jobs. And it's not just about the provision of great technology. So number one job is to talk to your partners, not just about the technology. CA has a long-standing reputation in delivering great technology for the mainframe. We can assume that they're pretty competent when it comes to that sort of stuff. But there are other things that they can work with you on. They can spend some time with you to help you make sure that you're getting the most out of the technology that you've bought. And trust me, I'm nagging them all the time to offer that to you at low, or sometimes, dare I say it, no cost, because it's in their interest to make sure that you're getting the most effective use out of their technology. So talk to them while you're here and challenge them with that. And I think you'll be surprised at how willing to listen they are. Now, of course, they're not going to give you 1,000,000 days of free consulting. Again, we're not in Hogwarts. But what they might do is be able to point you in the direction of a couple of really good resources who, even in a couple of hours on the phone or half a day on your site, could make a radical difference to the way you are able to run your platform. And the same challenge you should put to your friends at IBM, and indeed all of the other vendors. And in fact, if a vendor isn't willing to support you and engage with you, you ought to think twice about whether or not they're the right partner for you. Because you want partners, not suppliers, when it comes to supporting the mainframe. And the other two to-dos, and I'm going to give you a bonus one at the end as well, but the other two to-dos relate to what you do with the existing workload that you're running on the mainframe. And I know that the mainframe environment is typically always the most efficiently managed environment within any organization. If you compare mainframe mid-range versus Intel, Intel is the wild, wild west with utilization rates, even in a superb environment, of 30 whole percentage points. And I've got some clients, albeit crazy clients, who are running their mainframes at 99+% utilization, the other end of the spectrum. Not something I would necessarily recommend, but people have shown themselves capable of doing that. So yes, let's constantly revisit and revise the efficiency of the platform itself, and let's figure out what we can and should do to evangelize the mainframe. And again, you should be having conversations with CA and with IBM about both of those things. The final free challenge is you're here at an amazing event, and I challenge you to make one new friend at CA, someone who you'd be willing to pick up the phone to and have a chat with in a couple of months' time, and make one new friend from another organization. Not even in the same sector as yourselves. You know, this is an amazing opportunity, and it's great for people like me to stand up and wave their arms at you, but you're sitting among some amazing experts. And if you look to your left and you think, well, that person does look pretty expert, then shake their hand and start that friendship. Thank you very much for your attention.